Yes, and we're back. We are the Coalition, loud and proud, outrage porn free, civilly disobedient media broadcasting live on the Worldwide Coalition Media Network here at the Go Local Live Broadcast Center. Facebook.com/The Coalition Radio, on the Mighty Mighty Twitter at Coalition_radio, and CoalitionRadio.us. You'll also see links there to our new podcast page. This show will be broken up in a matter of minutes, right, Joe? To provide you with a podcast experience on all four guests that we had this evening. I want to get right to it because she was kind enough to come into studio, and we're running a few minutes late. Barbara Holmes is joining us tonight. She is with an organization that I used to refer to as RERA, and now has evolved into being a local political group supporting conservative Republicans, in acting as really a support network for folks who might be more right of center. Folks know that I'm a libertarian, so her and I are going to agree on a lot of issues. We might disagree on a few. But ultimately, what I found fascinating was a press release that I got talking about civics. So I'm going to turn it right over to you because my voice is atrocious right now. But tell us, first of all, about yourself professionally, and then how you became involved in the Liberty Movement, and what spoke to you about the failure, the absence of our civics training here in Rhode Island.
I'm Barbara Holmes. I chair the Rhode Island Conservative Republican Caucus. Actually, it's Republican Conservative Caucus. I'm a CPA. I have a firm in Barrington, Rhode Island, and so I'm used to being up really, really late on this time of year. So the time frame is nothing. This is early, actually. I found out I was part of RERA, the treasurer actually, for quite a few years. And I found out that mandatory civics graduation had been taken out of the public school requirement in the 70s. And I was shocked. That's potentially 2 generations of citizens of Rhode Island that have no idea of how the government is run. Mm-hmm. And so I decided to try to do something about that. Because of being so upset about the fact that it was taken out, I kind of became known around Barrington as the one who was pushing for civics education. So a man named Mike Trophy was looking for a judge for the We the People contest, and I was recommended. Now, I'm not an attorney, and I'm not a social studies or government studies teacher, so I didn't feel adequate at all for being a judge, but they assured me that it would be fine, and so I joined, and I love it. And I found out about the organization and found out that we probably better make some legislation to deal with this issue. So in 2016 or so, I found a piece of legislation that would require civics, passing civics, to be a requirement for graduating from high school. And so I had now, met some senators and some representatives, and I asked them to introduce it. So it was introduced in 2017 and immediately held in committee until this day. So I thought, well, maybe that's not the way to go. But I started doing some more research and found out that Rhode Island has standards for civics education K through 12. So the curriculum people of the state are willing to have some sort of civics education in the public school system, but someone has blocked it or thought it wasn't a good idea. I love to study history and found out that one of the things that the Founding Fathers said was that we have to be a citizenry that's informed in order to retain a republic. Now, obviously, if probably two generations of Rhode Islanders have not learned how civics and the government works, then we do not have an informed population. So I've, again, gotten a hold of some state reps and state senators, and again gave them the bill. As a matter of fact, the bill that was introduced in 17, and we'll see what happens this time. I really believe that if most of the citizens of Rhode Island knew that their children were learning nothing concerning civics, they would be pretty upset about that. As a matter of fact, there's a group of teenagers that have
Right.
decided that they were not adequately trained to be good citizens, and they're suing the state and the governor. I think that's pretty telling.
No, absolutely. Do you find it ironic that this particular generation of young people, which I'll define loosely as being in college and then later high school, is amongst the most political in recent years, yet is seemingly so, and I say this with love and affection, because I'm not one of these people who beats up on kids. If the kids have issues, very often it's the responsibility of the parents who raise
Sure.
them. But do you find irony there that these kids are so overtly political? You've got this grassroots following for Bernie Sanders, yet I would think, and I've seen this firsthand, that these people a lot of them don't even understand that we do not live in a democracy.
Right.
That we live in a republic. I mean,
In a republic, that's right. That's right. That's interesting. It's like the founding fathers thought a democracy would just absolutely be repulsive. It wouldn't work, and it would be actually tyranny eventually. And well, if you aren't taught what our Constitution is about, how our government works, and know the difference between socialism and a republic, and somebody was constantly pushing down your throat the fact that socialism is going to make everybody equal and everybody will have whatever they need. And Margaret Thatcher kind of summed it up really well, I thought. She said, the problem with socialism is eventually you run out of other people's money. And that's true. And I'm part of a national kind of think tank for a kind of a more biblically based economic system. And we had a round table a few years ago in Florida, and we kind of had a joke that we were passing around, is that the government doesn't have any chickens to divide. It doesn't produce anything. The only place that government is going to get money is from the people by taxation. And so they're not realizing that these people that they think are so incredibly wealthy do not have enough money individually or collectively to run the nation for a very small time. And so they think that the government is going to somehow produce this money out of. My father used to tell me, money doesn't grow on trees.
Right.
I was disappointed. I thought that would be a great idea, but I learned more about government, and I thought, no.
Well, I mean, and again, you get to some of the basic structures. First of all, folks need to understand that taxation occurs through the use of coercion. You don't voluntarily pay taxes. I'm a libertarian, so we look askance at that. Folks don't understand that the ultimate minority is the individual, and that mob rule in the form of a democracy is contemptible. With the socialism challenge, what I find fascinating, and this is a recent thing to me, maybe it's anecdotal in nature, I'm running into a lot of older teenagers and young 20-somethings whose parents came over here as a result of the Soviet breakdown.
Yes.
So you've got first-generation
Yes.
Americans who are Romanian. And we think of Romanians as a sort of charming country. It was amongst the most brutal dictatorships in recent world history. Eclipsed maybe only by North Korea. The Ceausescus were just quite frankly, made the Russians, as you and I would think about the Russians, the Soviets, I should say, as Chamber of Commerce types. I mean, these were brutally repressive organizations that literally stole from people in order to create a false sense of equality, while at the same time promoting artificial societies within societies to reward people in government. And just brutal regimes at every level. And yet now you've got a generation, what do you think of this generation that is lionizing socialism? What do you say to them?
Well, I think the first thing is to explain what it is, and how is it going to work? It's never worked in history.
There's that.
Yeah, You know what I love to tell young people that, when the Pilgrims came and they came to this vast place and they had, you know, can you imagine from sea to shining sea, everything is kind of almost up for grabs, and they were forced into socialism for the first 7 years.
Right.
Result, half of them died. That's and then there was another time in Massachusetts history that again it was tried and it just doesn't work. The big hue and cry was, if your next meal is not dependent upon your working and you're bringing in what you need to provide for that meal, and everybody's going to get an equal amount no matter what kind of output they're giving as far as energy and time, and everybody's going to get the same, pretty soon everybody defaults. I kind of like to say people and electricity and water flow to the path of least resistance. If I don't have to, why should I? It's like I can stay here and rest and whatever, walking back and forth or something, and I'll still have what I need. Well, after a while, everybody isn't working and everybody isn't trying. And pretty soon there's no crop and there's no food, and then you have starvation because that's why these brutal regimes come in. It's like, what do you mean you're not working? Because I'm going to get most of the profit from what you're doing. So get out there and work. And then pretty soon there's whips that are being forced on their backs or whatever to keep them going, just like you would do to an animal or a horse.
Was there any one moment in time that the Rhode Island Department of Education or any individual school system documented why they stopped teaching civics?
I don't know. I don't know. I just found out that it happened, and I actually raised most of my kids in private schools, so they did learn some civics, which I'm very thankful for at this point. And so I don't really know the answer to that.
Right. It just magically, is it by accident? I mean, I'll say, this is more of an editorial note from me, the conspiracy theorist in me, which usually isn't that pronounced, isn't surprised that a school system like Providence would shy away from civics. Again, an informed electorate who knows where to shine the light and how to shine the light and understands what their rights are, reacts very differently.
I agree with you. I have to stop trying. I have to push down my conspiracy theorist being as well, because if you were planning to take this country, or let's just talk about Rhode Island, into a more socialistic kind of paradigm, you would have to take away a lot of knowledge from the people, because people aren't going to willingly go into slavery if they know there's something else that's available.
Well, and I was up at the State House the other night when the ACLU is sponsoring a revision, if you will, to modernize, if you will, the open meetings laws. And open meetings are the linchpin of a responsible government. And there's so many ways that Rhode Island discourages opening meetings. If anyone's ever been up to the State House to testify, you'll understand that half of the rooms don't even have access to any sort of modern communications equipment.
Right.
So meetings are not recorded. I happened to be at the last Senate Finance Committee meeting that voted to approve the Pawtucket Red Sox baseball stadium subsidy. The one that ended up dying anyway, thank God. But none of that was televised. I mean, the state was looking at a $100+ million commitment in a very controversial environment, and hardly anyone knew when the meeting was.
Wow. There
was hardly anyone there. I pretty much lived at the State House at that point. And again, it's reflected now, the cynicism that has built out of the electorate from not knowing what's going on is an assumption that they don't have the right to know what's going on. And that results in very low turnout rates. We had a special election in District 68 just a few weeks ago, and an astonishingly small amount of the electorate showed up to vote, despite the fact that the prior inhabitant was thrown out of office before he even got the chance to be sworn in. And a turnaround that even by Rhode Island standards is sort of astonishing. Lofton Longo, his real name, never even got sworn. He only got one picture. There's one picture of him in the State House. And, through a variety of machinations, he ended up getting thrown out, what do they call it, hoisted on his own petard. And yet hardly, despite the outrage of that, hardly anybody showed up for the special election. That the state, because of Democratic Party intransigence, was forced to pay for. The state pays for all these things, so effectively we pay for all these things. In terms of civil liberties, what would you envision the ideal course, and at what age do you think, based on your experience and your research, should it be taught at? When will it be most compelling and interesting?
As far as a course necessary for graduation at the high school level.
Right.
However, it's very telling that our standards in our state start with kindergarten. To be a good citizen, the training needs to start right away. And I would think even at home before, and I really believe the responsibility of all education vests with the parents and with,
Yes.
and with the individual. Don't get me off into that.
No, that's fine. You're in friendly territory there.
But it's telling that the standards have K through 12. I think that's something, and I've spoken to some people that, were preschool and kindergarten teachers that were very, very focused on getting a kind of civics or governmental kind of environment in their class to train. And I think to get back to your question about, so when did they take it out? I think if you have an overall plan to basically change the government that we are operating under, a constitutional republic, then if people have, oh my goodness, something is unconstitutional, and that's kind of close to the unpardonable sin, and how can they do that? Well, if most of the citizenry have no clue what the Constitution says or what rights and liberties it gives, then they can say anything is unconstitutional. Well, you don't have the right to walk down that street right now. That's not up. You can't do that. And it was pretty evident in the debates in the last election, where, I saw some candidates that were, that's unconstitutional, and what they were proposing was what was unconstitutional.
Right.
And so if you want to control someone, it's very easy to control them if you keep them incredibly ignorant of what the rules are that we're established under, and then you're getting to your meetings rules. So then, because nobody's going to realize that they have any authority or that they have any say, no one's going to show up.
Right.
And no one's going to think, well, if I have a voice, and that voice matters, then you're able to change the whole governmental structure, and nobody knows, and quite frankly doesn't care. And I think finally we have seen some major segments of the population are saying, whoa, wait a minute, not on my watch. There's something that I can do. I'm going to make my voice heard. And we're seeing that where more people are getting engaged and saying, no, that's wrong. It's absolutely wrong. And what are you trying to do in our state? And saying, you know what? I've never done this before. I've never gone to the State House. I've never, whatever, for whatever reason, didn't think they were supposed to, or wasn't all that important. And now they're saying, whoa, this is getting really bad. And why? Well, because I didn't say anything, or I didn't do anything, or I didn't encourage other people to do the same.
Witness the conversation you probably overheard about Tuesday night at the General Assembly with the Second Amendment debates that are coming up. My wife teaches in the dreaded private sector, and their third graders at her school every year go to the General Assembly.
Great.
Where they have a sample. They learn what it takes to draft a bill. They are hosted usually by a House representative or a state senator, and then they pass the bill, and it's usually something cute, like more pizza at lunch or something. But they're brought through the process step by step. So as you and I know, or as as my friend Mark and I spoke earlier today, we know how the sausage is made.
Yep. Yep.
We may not get to the sub A or the sub B level or the really arcane stuff, but you understand how bills are formulated. That's at the third grade level.
That's great.
So when one then gets to high school or to college, you're not challenging something as important as the electoral college and saying, the electoral college is bad because our guy or our gal hasn't won a couple times because the electoral college is wrong. It's screwing people. No, it's not. I find it astonishing that any Rhode Island federal representative would rail against the electoral college when, unique amongst the states, Rhode Island has the most to lose.
Yeah, it's true. It is, and to think, imagine 4 states would control the president for now and forevermore if we lost the electoral college. The founding fathers knew the document they created is fairly amazing.
Right.
They read the classics in the Greek.
Right.
They read the Bible in the Hebrew. They were very, very educated, and were fleeing something that they knew was going in the wrong direction. And our founder, Roger Williams, was one of the most important men in the formation of our state and our national government.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, you just look at the atrocities over time, again, based on what people think, what they think are their presumed rights, yet, again, take the right to bear arms.
Right, very important.
How many people understand? It's interesting because I'm a libertarian, I'm not a Republican. I appeared on WPRO once and to talk about the libertarian movement. And someone called in, they were very angry, very, very angry.
Oh, wow.
And they said, why do we have a Second Amendment? So that an armed citizenry can overthrow a dictatorial government. Oh, you're right, click.
Yes.
That's why we have a Second Amendment. We don't have it for sporting goods. It's nice that helps that. We don't have it for target shooting. It's nice that it helps that. We have it, and people don't want to hear this because they don't think it could ever happen here.
Yeah, I've heard that over and over again. When I was at the committee that passed Roadmap Rhode Island,
Oof.
and I know, and I actually videoed a lot of it, a lot of the testimony, and I videoed the vote. And when I explained what Roadmap Rhode Island is, and that the UN Agenda 21 logo was on it originally, because I guess they figured no one would know what Agenda 21 was. And I almost all the time I hear, that would never happen here. Well, of course it would happen here if you don't do something about it. Of course it will happen here. Mm-hmm. So, and that is a really scary bill, and I believe that's where they're going. With I believe Agenda 21 is exactly where the plan is taking us, and evidence of that is Roadmap Rhode Island, now called Rhode Island Rising. It's scary, and it's every city and town. I live in Barrington, and we are having to deal with it, and trying to figure out how to circumvent it is almost impossible. Mm-hmm. And it's very, very scary, and it is full-blown socialism. Right,
and let's get to property rights. I mean, again, what should be a fundamental assumption in our country. Again, as a libertarian, we take it to, I think it's to where it's supposed to be. I have the right, if I own property, to use it in a manner as I see fit, as long as I aggress no one, as long as I do not use coercion. I have the right to host whomever I want.
Yes.
And yet you've got a nation that clearly continues to expand the role of eminent domain And you've got
Yep.
a nation that continues to expand law enforcement's ability to, to take someone's property. And neither of those should be tolerated. But again, you've got an entire generation of people who think it's okay.
Right.
And it's never okay. Private property is the fundamental key
It
to
is.
our society.
It's huge.
And that has to be respected literally at all costs.
I agree with you.
So I mean, you could spend, literally you could have a course every year in civics from the tiniest of tots, once they get to read a little bit, maybe second, third grade, and make it fun and make it kind of lighthearted, but give them sort of an underpinning. And also I think it makes it more attractive for them to become political.
Yes.
Now they can define what ideology they want to pursue, but when it's made more accessible, then it's no longer, oh, there's no way to fight it. If I could collect all the coffee bets that I have on a freaking baseball stadium, all the people told me, why was I wasting our time? Why were the libertarians wasting their time? It's going to get built anyway. And as you drove here, I think one thing absent from the skyline was a baseball stadium, wasn't it?
Yeah,
All right.
I noticed its absence.
That's just my own personal obsession, if you will. Everyone political has got their cause, and mine is crony capitalism. Or I should really say crony corporatism. Other people have other causes. The right to medical privacy. We've got a state where we created a database of prescription medicine being used by people. And it was going to be kept private. And then we had a guy named Kilmartin, who became Attorney General, who after years of trying got a bill passed where there is now a database and it is accessible without the need of a warrant. That's appalling. It's just, on every level, it's wrong. I don't care what your intentions are. And I think ultimately the goal of a civics education is for people to understand that the road to hell is paved with good intentions.
Yeah, it's
And
true.
your good intentions, or conversely, whatever public tragedy happened to have at that moment, should not ever dictate public policy.
And I think that's part of what we're seeing, especially with the Second Amendment. We're seeing that very, very strongly. We have to take away guns. Well, they're for the purpose that you mentioned originally. Mm-hmm. And if we don't study civics, then we're not going to know why the Second Amendment is there. And so therefore, it's very evil. The Founding Fathers were terrible, and better take it out. One of my grandchildren said to me, guns are evil. Why should we have guns? When it was. And so I said, I took this imaginary gun and put it on the table, and I said, okay, that's a gun. Pretend that's a gun, and it's live, and it's ready to go. How many people is that gun going to kill? She said, no one. I said, well, so do guns kill or do people kill? I said, what about, okay, we have knives, that people are using knives, and they're killing with knives. So if we're going to take away guns because they kill people, then we have to take away knives because they kill people. Oh, wait a minute, they're using vehicles. They're using vehicles to just run into people that are standing in any mob. So we have to take away the vehicles. Mm-hmm. And then her response was, well, what about the safety of the children? And I said, well, if I really cared about the safety of the children, and there are thousands and thousands of children being killed because of texting and driving, or just driving and they're not experienced and they run into situations that they can't handle. So if that's the criteria, then I have to take away your phone and your ability to drive a car. Right. So it's like you can coerce people by there's a saying that a man I knew of used to say, the mind cannot tell the difference between truth and that which is vividly and repeatedly imagined. Mm-hmm. So if you want to present something and you want this generation to believe it as absolute truth. You continually, vividly bring that image to them over and over and over again. The government that we have now is evil. It is not based on something you want. There is a much better way. And you repeatedly and vividly give all the reasons why it's such an evil, evil document. And the founding fathers were evil. And they had terrible intentions. Christopher Columbus was a horrible person. And keep harping and harping. And you start at kindergarten, you go all the way through college. Then you have a person with a mindset that they believe is absolute reality, and it isn't. So our job now is to say, okay, hold on, time out. Let's take a look. What is this document really like? What is our government like? Let's teach it. And then let's apply it. Do we potentially need changes to the way we're governing? I personally would like to see term limits. You know, I don't quite understand how somebody living in a very expensive area with a fixed income of a representative or senator or even a president can become incredibly wealthy on being a civil servant. That's not what it was all about.
Yeah, a friend of mine has a great way of putting it. He says, civil service and government is supposed to be about people who want to help lives, not get one. My friend, a good friend John Fennessy has a great way of talking about inanimate objects that can be used to harm people. As he likes to say, the problem is not possession, the problem is aggression. And the issues begin at aggression, not possession.
And that it begins at the home.
Right.
It kind of comes back to the family.
We've only got literally a couple minutes left. We're actually technically a little over time, but I want to, where is it? So you've submitted the same legislation.
I have.
In 2017.
Yes.
It is submitted to which committee?
I've just submitted it to two senators and 2 reps at this point. So it
Okay.
hasn't been introduced.
So those are your sponsors.
Well, and whoever they,
Right.
it was in the House and the Senate last time. It was introduced bipartisanly, so it wasn't like it was a one-sided.
Right. Is Blake one of your folks behind it, or who is?
He said that he would introduce it. Yes.
All right, great. So good. It's got a chance then. So it is not in committee per se yet.
Right,
It has been presented. It's written. It's ready to roll. Now it's a question of working it through the committee.
Yes.
All right. I hope you will. I mean, I really enjoyed getting the press release today. I thought it was great. I will hope you would keep me apprised of its progress. That's one of those hearings that people need to show up at.
Yes, it is.
It really is. If you're
is.
looking to have some type of generational change against the kind of current madness out there, where people are literally preaching socialism and really don't understand how our government was designed to work, this is the first antidote to start to reverse the problem. You know, it isn't going to happen overnight.
That's right.
We've allowed.
No, that's right.
We've allowed as a society to have these people knowledge deteriorate over an extended period of time, but you have to start somewhere. And I applaud your efforts because everyone should agree to this. It is a bipartisan issue.
It's true.
If you actually care about government and how it impacts people's lives, regardless of what your political persuasion is,
Exactly.
then you should have the strength and the integrity of your own ideas to know that they should be able to stand up to a generation that's actually trained in civics. And you should not fear knowledge of civics as something that's going to be an attack on your belief system.
That's right.
You should have that. You should be comfortable and confident in that.
Yes, I agree. I totally agree.
Are you guys good now? How can folks reach out to you or to your organization? I know you've gone through some changes in the last year or so.
Yes.
You've become more of a localized organization. So how can folks reach out to you?
Well, we actually have meetings at the GOP headquarters the second Saturday of every month at 1 o'clock, and we welcome you to come and check out what we stand for. We have some precepts, we call them, that we ask you to agree with 80% of them in order to become part of the group. And then we're doing a number of initiatives. I'm a CPA, I love economics, and so we're looking at where the economy in this state is hurting, which is everywhere, and the fact that it's incredibly business unfriendly. So we're about to have some initiatives that will help people start businesses, decide on what kind of business form they want, and come alongside and be a help to them, because that's not really happening, and we're losing a lot of the people that graduate now. And people have great ideas, but they don't know how to make them profitable.
All right, we have 4 or 5 of the finest universities on the planet
Yeah,
within 10 miles of where we're sitting right now.
that's true.
How is it possible? And we are 15 miles away from arguably one of the hottest economies on the planet in the form of Boston.
Yes.
How is it that we are so broke and so broken?
Taxation, 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 and fees and regulations. There's no better way to muzzle a business and keep it from being successful than to regulate it. Those regulations are intended to keep the businesses down. And if you want to keep the vast middle class down, then you muzzle their ability to be able to build businesses. And they don't have to be huge. As a matter of fact, people don't realize that 85% of the people that work in the United States work for a small business.
Right.
And so people think of, well, the corporation is so evil and it's doing these terrible things, and some of them are, but they're usually the international companies so all the laws are written for the international companies that potentially are, some are wonderful and some are not so wonderful. But the thing is, 85% of our jobs come from the small business environment. So by definition, if you cause these small businesses to be unwelcome, unable to make a profit, unable to hire people, you have destroyed your economy.
And that's what we've done.
And that's what we've done. We have absolutely done that. So we have a number of initiatives that we're doing, not just the civics. We're doing that. We're keeping very careful, trying to be very careful to get the word out. The Rotary Reporter, which is a great thing that Mark Smiley and Mark Zakaria have put together to be able to get some. So what's happening in the State House? I love the way he does his bunker little skits. And this is what's happening. I'm in this incredibly dangerous zone, and this is what's going on. To make people aware, because quite frankly, the mainstream media is not telling all of the story.
I hear you.
It takes snippets and gives a totally toward a bias. And we want to let's give the rest of the story. Why did something happen? What did really happen? And people need to know that.
And that's why independent media is so important.
It's huge. It's absolutely huge.
And we've run out of time for tonight. I want to thank you so much for coming in. It's really so much help. I know folks can't always do it, but it's so helpful when you're in studio. It's just so much. The give and take is so much more immediate, so much personal.
It's true. Yeah, that's
so, please keep us up to date on this.
I will.
Efforts, and we'll do everything we can in our own little way to support them.
Excellent. Thank you very much for having me. I really appreciate it.
All right. So, Barbara Holmes, conservative Republican, working diligently to bring back a true understanding of your civil liberties, your rights, your responsibilities, and how exactly our government works, and so that you can understand really how it doesn't work. Folks, we've kept Joe late tonight. First of all, I want to thank folks who tuned in. We ran a little late in getting in here. I want to thank our sponsors, Yacht Club, Air Sciences, Beacon Shipping and Logistics. Without them, the coalition would not exist as we approach our 5th anniversary, incredibly enough. I want to thank the folks at Go Local Prov for being great hosts. We are the coalition, loud and proud, outrage porn-free, civilly disobedient media, broadcasting live on the Worldwide Coalition Media Network here at the Go Local Live Broadcast Center, deep in the heart of the city we love. The rain has stopped. Please come out to Providence. Enjoy any one of a number of fine institutions. As I like to say, there are more ways to sin in Providence than possibly anywhere alive. Facebook.com/The Coalition Radio. If you're listening to this the first time, please like and follow our page. CoalitionRadio.us, the mothership. You'll see links there tomorrow now to this and our new podcast page on Spreaker, and of course on the mighty Twitter at coalition_radio, where we would ask you to follow us there as well. Social media is the linchpin of independent media. It gives us a forum at little or no cost to amplify our message, to kind of duke it out with the big boys. We've got another great show coming next Friday. Thank you very much. I know you have a lot of choices to where you spend your Friday night. We thank you for spending it.